Also joining us are my colleagues Akshay Dongre as well as Shubhendu Ghosh. To you first, Akshay. Before I come to you, Akshay, let me just recap again the latest news that's coming in as we speak. According to the Jerusalem Post newspaper of Israel, sirens are sounding across northern Israel, including Golan Heights, as Iran retaliates. It goes on to say Iran has launched towards Israel, and it comes after the US President Trump confirmed that the US has begun an operation against the Islamist regime. Akshay, what more are you picking up?
Well, the latest information, Ramesh, that's coming in right now is a statement from the Israeli Defense Forces who are stating that Iran has already launched missile strikes against Israel and they are intercepting the strikes. So I would like to read the statement which says that a short while ago, sirens were sounded in several areas across the country following the identification of missile launched from Iran towards the state of Israel. The public is requested to follow the instruction of Home Front Command. At this time, the Israeli Air Force is operating to intercept the strike threats where necessary to remove the threat. The defense is not hermetic and therefore it is essential that a public continue to adhere to the Home Front Command's guidelines, and they are requested to follow all the guidelines that have been given to the people. So it is clear that Iran has already launched a retaliatory strike that is being intercepted right now, but Israel also understands that no 100% protection can be provided, even though they have an Iron Dome, even though they have excellent missile tracking capabilities, and they can intercept several missiles at the same time. But Iran also has been preparing itself for the worst, and the worst has now happened with strikes taking place in 5 major cities of Iran, including the capital Tehran, a city of Qom, and other cities as well in the central parts of the country. So if they launch a massive air barrage against Israel as well as the US forces, US bases in the region, including in Qatar, including in Jordan, in the UAE and other countries, there can be a massive damage to not only the infrastructure there, but also to the lives of civilians as well as military personnel that are stationed. But you cannot deny that the strike that has taken place in such a coordinated manner was not being planned in advance. So there has a planning that has gone into effect. So Israeli as well as the US forces would 100% would have taken into account a retaliation coming in from a country like Iran that is famous around the world for its missile capabilities, including the Fatah missile range as well as other missiles that it has procured from Russia as well as China. So the situation remains extremely tense right now. Sirens are being sounded in Israel. People have been asked to exercise utmost caution. An Air India flight that was traveling to Tel Aviv has turned around and has come back. That has a statement coming in from Air India as well. So the situation remains tense. Indian embassy has already issued a statement in Iran as well that Indians living in Iran should exercise utmost caution, should not go near military bases, should not go near crowded areas, and should remain sheltered as much as possible and wait for any more instruction coming in from the Indian embassy there in Tehran. So the situation is escalating right now. If the retaliations do take place and if there is casualties in Israel as well as in the US forces, then 100% there is going to be a much wider escalation that is going to take in a few hours from now. So it's a matter of hours now that will determine the fate of the region as well as the fate of this particular conflict. So situation is escalating by every minute. New reports coming in. Even a statement has come in from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has said that Iran must not be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. That has been their repeated statement for decades now. But it seems that the Atomic Energy Center being targeted and several other government offices being targeted, there can be mass casualties as well in Iran to not only the military personnel but civilians as well. So the scale of the Iranian retaliation will also depend on the damage that has been inflicted by the Israeli and US strikes on their country.
Right, so news coming in thick and fast. Akshay, stay on joining us. He's another of my colleagues, Suman as well. But Shubhendu, before I come to you, let me recap the news we are tracking here on DD India News. At this very moment, it is just getting to 2 p.m. New Delhi time or 10:30 in the morning in Tel Aviv. the US has launched what it calls a major combat operation in Iran designed to eliminate what it calls imminent threats from the country's Islamist regime. This, according to President Donald Trump. Israel saying that it has launched preventative strikes on Iran and is preparing for a retaliation from Iran and has since closed its airspace. Shubhendu, we've heard from Akshay talking about the situation in Tel Aviv and other places as we speak, and also about the places attacked inside Iran. Now, what do we know about the specific targets in those locations inside Iran? What were the US and Israeli forces actually trying to target?
Hello, Ramesh. Yes, things are evolving very fast. If I can just quickly give a context.
Sure.
I was, in fact, in Jerusalem yesterday, and we were returning from Jerusalem, and our drivers were informing how the markets today are all going to be shut. It's good that we're leaving yesterday because it's a day of Shabbat. There's Ramzan and Shabbat observation, for which today, Saturday, is going to be a time when most of the Israelis would have been at home. It's a religious holiday. There's also a period of Ramzan that is going on. People of Iran would be engaged. This morning, Israel and US, Ramesh, as we've been tracking, launched a joint strike on Iran. We also heard President Donald Trump on his Truth Social platform giving out a statement very clearly saying that it is a combat operation, and while there is it has been spoken that it is the nuclear ecosystem that they want to destroy of Iran, the threat of ballistic missile, President Trump said, in fact, very soon could in fact reach United States, and before it happens, America would like to completely obliterate. He uses that word very often, obliterate completely. This time, not just the defense ecosystem, but all the government itself. There are two levels of conversation that President Trump had in the context of Iran. One was directed at the regime, saying that this time the attack is for the regime change very clearly. He also said that he's giving an opportunity to the Revolutionary Guards, that's the Iranian army, to in fact surrender. To put it simply, the police must also surrender and not engage in combat. If they do, they would be treated fairly. They would in fact also be spared. If they do not, he says, they're most definitely going to be killed. And then he speaks to the people of Iran directly, saying that they've waited for this kind of a revolution and United States assistance for a long time. And the moment of that has come now. They are now going to completely destroy the head of Iranian regime, the government, clearly aiming at the supreme leader and President Pezeshkian. And that brings me to answer the question that you'd asked, Ramesh, about the places that were targeted. Tehran, of course, was the most important target, Iranian capital. But the attacks have been spread across Iran. We're learning about Isfahan, Tabriz, Elam, Qom city, important religious capital of Iran. Disbul in the south is also being targeted. So we see a very expansive choice of targets by the joint forces of the United States and Israel. Some of the key targets in Tehran, in fact, happen to be key government offices. So it appears that the target may have been in a manner that we've seen in earlier in Venezuela, to target, as it were, the head of the state, head of the government, and try to see how things develop from there. But what we're hearing from sources in Iran is that President Pezeshkian and Supreme Leader Khamenei have in fact been moved to a secret location. But these targets targeting the main government building clearly state, Ramesh, that they were, what the American and the Israeli forces were aiming to do is to eliminate the top of the government and then see how things percolate. And then President Trump's message to the people of Iran that it is your time to now take over the government. America is launching its biggest ever attack on Iran. It's ready to topple this government, which he uses many adjectives to talk about. It's a source of mass terror. He says he also refers to the history of Iran-US conflict. He says that this Iranian regime has always chanted death to America, and the threats have only increased in the recent past. He refers to the operation, remember, less than 6 to 8 months ago, the Midnight Hammer operation targeting Iranian nuclear facilities in Natanz, Fordow. And he says this time they're not just targeting any defense infrastructure alone, but they want to topple this. In no uncertain terms, it talks about an operation which is aimed at regime change.
Right.
So that makes Ramesh, this particular operation, which is ongoing and expected to last quite long, very significant. Ramesh?
Indeed. Just to recap the big news we are tracking here on DD India at this moment, it is just after 2 p.m. in New Delhi, 10:30 in the morning in Tel Aviv, and you're watching a continuous coverage here on DD India of the latest joint strikes on Iran by both the US and Israeli forces. If I can quickly recap the news we are tracking at this moment, Israel says it has launched a preventative missile attack against Iran. Israel's defense ministry is saying that it has launched a quote-unquote preemptive strike on Iran as sirens sounded in Jerusalem, and people across the country received phone alerts about an extremely serious threat. Before I bring in my colleague and a special guest, Ambassador Anil Kumar Trigunai, let me again recap the news that we are tracking here on DD India News Hour. According to ANI news agency, Iranian officials on Saturday have vowed a quote-unquote crushing response against their targets in response to a major joint military strike by Israel and the US. This, according to Iran's Tasnim news agency. It goes on to say that Israel and the US launched a joint military strike on Iran, which was codenamed Operation Roaring Lion, targeting military sites, missile production facilities, and areas near Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's office. So these are interesting and important information.